Welcome to Bucs Insider Live. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. And man, nice to have a win to talk about, and a win that felt like it addressed some of the things that had been concerns after the Chiefs game that I think a lot of people talked about how they felt like this was going to be one of those kind of get-right games, hopefully, that the team felt a bit of a chip on their shoulder after the way the Chiefs game went, and that this Atlanta team was going to force them to address some of those things, like, for example, the run game and wanting to get the run game started on our end. That it was just, that's all, I felt like that was all we were talking about leading up to that game, was the run game on their side, the run game on our side, and how that was going to go. So let's just start for you. What were some of the big takeaways watching how this Falcons game panned out and what it means about this team?
Well, I guess I would modify everything you just said to say all of that was great for 3 quarters.
Yes.
So the Buccaneers are still not, and they would say the same thing, played a full game, but through the first 3 quarters, what they did that they hadn't really been doing in the first 4 games was playing a good complementary football with every phase of the game working well together. And the Buccaneers, for instance, had 3 straight drives in the first and second quarters that went 11 or more plays. They ended up with 5 drives of 11 more plays, which is really good. I mean, that means you're converting on third downs and you're picking up a lot of good gains, not necessarily big plays. There weren't a ton of explosive plays, a couple by Mike Evans, of course, and one by Chris Godwin, but mostly it was a lot of, for the Falcons, it was death by a million paper cuts. It was just, they couldn't stop the Leonard Fournettes, the Cade Ottens, and so on, and Scotty Miller was contributing. So that was another thing I would take away from that game, is we found some guys who hadn't been really contributing a ton to the passing attack did, and that really helped because the Falcons, as Todd Bowles explained after the game, their defense, they were trying to bracket the outside guys, and they were trying to clutter up the middle to make it hard to run directly up the gut. So that's why you saw a lot of passes sort of to the flared out to the outside to like Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White.
Right, who Leonard Fournette ended up being the leading receiver for the Buccaneers in a game that had Mike Evans and had Chris Godwin, and it wasn't because those guys didn't do good things. It was just, plays, it was the Lenny Fournette day, it felt like. And what did you see overall from his game and what this has meant maybe about his production, especially after these last few games where the run game in particular had not really been going, and really it had been since the Cowboy game where we saw him get a lot of stats.
Yeah, and it's clear that Tom Brady trusts throwing the ball to Leonard Fournette, so since that's what the Falcons were giving, that he was perfectly willing to keep feeding it to Leonard. And since the start of last year, and even probably since the 2020 playoffs, it's been pretty clear that Leonard Fournette is an underrated pass catcher. And if you look at this, since the start of last year, only Christian McCaffrey, who's basically known as the best pass catching back in football, if not Austin Eckler, who's right underneath Leonard Fournette, those guys, he's right there with them in terms of how many times he catches passes in a game. And in this particular game, he caught 10 for 83, which were both career highs for him. And it was the first 10-catch game by a Buccaneer running back since Ernest Graham in 2007. And it was pretty cool because Ernest Graham was there as the legend of the game. So it was almost like it was meant to be.
It was meant to be, for sure. And, it was interesting just thinking about, as you talked about what they were giving them, those throws to Leonard were what they were giving them. I've heard Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich, everybody get asked about, I think people are trying to figure out what, now that Todd Bowles is the head coach, what does an ideal Todd Bowles game look like? What does his strategy look like? And every time they just keep talking about, well, it's whatever the other team gives us. That, of course, you're always going to want to get the run game going or want to get the ball into Mike Evans and Chris Godwin's hands or, whatever. But then it is about, we're not just going to force things because it's what we want to do. We're going to see what the other team is giving us. And I feel like we've seen that so far, that it's the adjustment into reading what goes on. And that may also be part of why it feels like the team kind of gets a little bit better as the game goes on offensively, and sometimes maybe those first couple drives aren't as effective. They read what's going on, make adjustments, and then start producing a little bit more.
Well, as you said accurately, Todd Bowles has said every time that topic has come up that he doesn't care if it's 50 passes or 50 runs, whatever gets you the points and the wins. But I think probably the most telling thing that either of those two have said about this is Byron Leftwich saying it's not really about balance, because everybody wants to use the word balance, and I understand you do want to have a balanced attack, but what Byron says is what we want to be is multiple. So we want to be able to win this way. If the defense is presenting this, like what Atlanta did to us, we want to be able to do what is necessary to beat that. If they are, putting only 6 men in the box and they want you to run the ball because they don't want you to throw, then we need to be able to run the ball. So it's not about balance, it's about being able to do a lot of things well.
Right.
And in this particular game, being able to pick up a lot of yards by throwing the ball underneath to your running back and your tight ends and even Scotty Miller across the middle, then that's what we can do.
Yeah.
And and then at some point we can also hit big plays to Mike Evans because he's so good.
Right. Yeah. He knows how to do this football thing. One of the stats that I thought was really interesting, and probably one of the ones I would have least expected in this game, was how many sacks the defense got. When we heard that it was just the Falcons were going to run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, I don't know that I would have expected 5 sacks on the game. 5 sacks is already incredible no matter what, even if it's a team that throws the ball all the time, and 5 sacks by 5 different people was really incredible. What did that tell you about what this defense is capable of and just the way that Todd Bowles is using so many different people?
Well, it means that we're taking advantage of those opportunities. And it's funny because last year, I remember one of the narratives of the pass rush was we were getting a lot of pressure, and some of the guys were getting a lot of pressure, and they weren't necessarily converting into sacks. They weren't making all in those sack opportunities into sacks. This year, it's kind of flipped because if you look at this is very encouraging, right? 19 sacks through 5 games, which is really good. It's almost 4 a game, and it's 3rd among all teams. And those are right now, San Francisco and Dallas are considered the best pass rushing teams in the league. Okay, so we're right there with them. That's encouraging. But the strange thing is, if you look at pressure rate, we're at about 24%, which ranks about 24th in the league. So we're not getting nearly as many pressures, but a higher percentage of them are becoming sacks. So I guess you can look at it 2 ways. You can be a little bit disappointed that we're not getting that pressure, or you can say, wow, there's a lot of meat left on this bone, right?
Yeah.
The Buccaneers,
and how good it is that they're actually getting them down.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that the Buccaneers pass rush can get a lot better. And considering we're 3rd in the league in sacks, that's pretty encouraging. One thing, though, is a lot of it's coming through blitzes. So our sack rate when we blitz is almost 40%, and that's in the top 10 in the league. So what we need is more pressure from non-blitzes. We need more pressures from Joe and Shaq and Logan Hall and all those guys.
Okay. And then I know that this coming week, going up to Pittsburgh, what are the biggest things standing out to you about this matchup and what the Bucs need to be on the lookout for going into this week?
Well, the biggest story, obviously, is that they've switched their quarterback. So we were going to face Mitchell Trubisky, who we basically single-handedly put in the Pro Bowl when he actually made the Pro Bowl one of those years in Chicago because he had, 20 touchdowns, and I think he had 6 in one game against us or something.
Yeah, that was crazy.
But we're not going to have to face Mitchell Trubisky and have our Trubisky revenge game because they have switched to their rookie, Kenny Pickett, who was the 20th pick in the draft and the only quarterback taken in the first 2 rounds, and it was a weird year for quarterbacks. But he was considered the most pro-ready, and so they're finding out now, is he ready? And he made his first start last week, did throw for something like 320 yards, but they only scored 3 points in a 33 loss. And he's thrown 3 interceptions and about 100 throws so far. So, there's maybe an opportunity to get some big plays off him. And again, we go back to pressure. I would be willing to bet that Todd Bowles is going to try to bring a lot of extra pressure on a rookie quarterback and confuse him.
Yeah, and this is where, definitely the way that he calls the defensive where you never know who's doing what would be very hard for a rookie. Yeah, when you see even Aaron Rodgers having to call a couple timeouts and be like, what is happening? It's going to be a little rough for him.
But, the good news is that since 2020, the Buccaneers have faced, 7 rookie quarterbacks, usually making one of their first couple starts, like Justin Herbert. Mac Jones, I think, was maybe in his 4th start, and they've beaten all of them except Daniel Jones, and remember, Matt Gay could have won that game with a field goal at the end. So the Todd Bowles defense has a pretty good track record against quarterbacks. Although, as you can see from the pass rating, a couple of those guys did pretty well. I mean, you probably recall Justin Herbert was amazing. It's just Tom Brady kind of outdueled him. Yeah. And then we won 38-31. So I have a pretty good feeling about Todd Bowles and his crew being able to handle a rookie quarterback.
Okay, now I want to get to a couple of our Facebook questions here before we finish. Delvin asked, how has Cade Otton impressed you, and do you think he could move into a starting role?
Well, this is funny because it was a similar question that was asked on Monday in Todd's press conference. Could his role expand? And Todd actually laughed a little bit. He complimented him in several ways, but he also laughed a little bit and said, I don't know how much more can expand. He played 94% of the snaps in the last game. Now, Cam Brate wasn't there, but if you look at their snaps, they're almost equal. They both missed 1 game, and Cade has about 20 more snaps than Cam does. And they both have almost the same amount of snaps in 11 personnel, which means 1 tight end on the field. So they're basically co-starters already. And Cade has actually started 4 games. It's just because whatever package we happen to be in.
Right.
So he's kind of already a starter. And what Coach Bowles always says about him is that he does everything right. And it's funny because I said that to him. We had him on our Salty Dogs podcast yesterday, and I was asking him a question. I said that Todd Bowles says that, and he started laughing. He goes, "I don't think I do everything right."
Yeah.
He said, "I got a lot of things I need to do better."
And that's pretty impressive because I feel like Bowles is not someone that hides when he thinks you're not doing things right. that most guys would say, "Yeah, Bowles." I think they would almost describe him as that he's never satisfied. That whatever you do, like I think Jamel talked about that, about how like, you can get an interception and it's, you should have taken that all the way back or whatever. He is a coach that is constantly pushing you to be more and more. So for him to say that about a rookie, it's pretty incredible.
I think what he means is he knows all of his assignments, and you can trust him to go where he's supposed to go. And I also thought in that game with the 6 catches that he had that he really displayed very sure hands, and he took some hits and held onto the ball. I just think he's a very solid player with room to grow.
Okay. Our other question is, Richard asked, any updates with Carlton, Edwards, and SMB?
Carlton's probably the best along those. He participated fully in practice yesterday. He went out of the game with a hip injury, but to be right back in full participation the next Wednesday probably means you're going to be fine.
Right.
Sean did not practice, and I believe he had an MRI on his quad injury, so he's probably the one that's most in doubt. Mike Edwards was limited. He's got an elbow thing, but I would imagine, unless it's really bad, you probably play with an elbow injury as a safety. All
right. Well, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider Live. Thank you, as always, for joining us and for those questions, and we'll be back here next week.